It looks like we are missing one speaker. That's totally fine. Shubham can join partway through, but we can, in the meantime, go ahead and get started. So, welcome, folks. It's great to see you all. So, back in January, I actually had the privilege of participating in Home for the Holidays. I thought it was an awesome experience. This was an escape room created from the ground up by WPI graduate students. I thought the puzzles were like super creative. The world building was awesome. I love the cozy vibes. And I went through that experience. I wanted to know a little more about what kind of prep and work goes into creating an escape room. So special thanks also to Dr. Melissa Kagan here for coordinating with the students for the panel. I'm super excited to learn from all of you. And I guess we can start out if we want to just go around giving little introductions, name, pronouns, background, and what your role was in the project.
Cool. Okay, I'll start. Thank you so much, Lauren. We really appreciate the opportunity to have this panel, and thank you so much for getting in touch and for doing all of this. It's awesome. Really excited to talk to everyone here. I'm Melissa Kagan. I am an assistant professor in interactive media and game development at WPI. I teach critical game studies, tabletop game design, and physical interactive experience design, like escape rooms or not escape rooms. My first book, Wandering Games, came out with MIT Press in 2022. It's available open access. And on this project, I taught the course in the fall that culminated with a bang in Home for the Holidays. And then when a couple excellent students came in January and said they really wanted to keep working on the project and revise it, I started out as an advisor on that project, and then kind of over time evolved into a narrative director on the project, and just kind of, that's it. Awesome. I'm passing this off to Kathleen.
Hello, thank you for your kind words about our first draft that we definitely have weird feelings about, but it's awesome to hear you talk so kindly about it. My name's Kathleen. I'm a Ph.D. student here at WPI in the computational media track in IMGD, and Melissa's actually my advisor. For Home for the Holidays, I was leading the direction team for that project, and for this project, I was more the director-producer. And we were prompted to sort of work on this project, and we had kind of free reign, and I take responsibility for roping Melissa into the narrative stuff, but I do not regret my actions, so sorry, but thank you. I'm going to pass it on over to Kat.
I will, in a timely fashion, turn on my microphone. So hi, I'm Catherine Crichton. I work at WPI in a day job capacity as an admin, which is going to come relevant later, but I am also an MFA candidate for IMGD. In my day-to-day life, pronouns, they, them, and background-wise, I am a genre writer. I've been in publishing for 25 plus years. I do experimental archaeology, and I'm very fascinated by audience and fiction. And for Home for the Holidays, I was on the narrative team, but I also ended up doing a lot of paper ephemera. I really like creating sort of world building and providing opportunities for people to get more immersed into things. I came in late into this project, life stuff, but in the last few moments, I came in with some narrative consulting. I did the majority, I think, of the paper ephemera for the room. And I ended up helping develop and creating the role of admin. So,
and generally was amazing. Just plugging that.
Oh God, I'm gonna pass this to Hannah because let's talk about amazing.
Hi, I'm Hannah Belan. I'm an MFA student here at WPI. I did the visual hoopla for the room. I did a lot of shopping around for vintage stuff, designing stuff, definitely not using The Sims to plan stuff out, and organizing.
Kat, Hannah's being very humble. Hannah was our art director and is an incredible talent. Just putting that out there.
Awesome. Thanks, all of you. So just to start out also, Dr. Kagan, could you tell us a little more about how this project came to be in the first place?
Sure. So in the fall, all of these students and a whole bunch more students, so a class of about 26 grad students, worked together to collaboratively create this final project that was Home for the Holidays. It ran for a week in December of 2023, and the students worked together in 6 different teams. So direction, production, narrative, art, puzzles, and electronics over the course of about 8 weeks. And that was after 8 weeks right at the beginning of the semester, which they spent playing games together and reading articles and talking about all sorts of things that interactive experiences could be. So we knew that at the end of the term, what would result would probably be an escape room. But these students in particular got really creative with the idea of like physical interactive experiences writ large. Like what other things could a physical interactive experience be other than an escape room? Something that this class was particularly interested in was the idea of coziness. As you could tell from Home for the Holidays, which you saw, it's kind of like got this aesthetically cozy vibe. Cozy games are pretty big right now. Characteristics of cozy games include safety, abundance, and softness. These are the characteristics you need in order for a game to feel cozy. So it's not just about aesthetic softness or like, cuteness, although part of it is that. It's also that the space has to feel safe. You have to feel like you're not about to get attacked or, your avatar's not about, like, you're not about to die. Like, there has to be this sense of abundance, like not that something is like running out. So we talked a lot about what that would mean. And the room that the students came up with, it was awesome, but it didn't actually wind up feeling that cozy. It was sort of a much more traditional, like a 50-minute timed experience. You had to move through the puzzles. You had to like escape the room. The experience was stressful. So the students who wanted to keep working on it thought, okay, what could we do to like really push this second draft into the direction of coziness? Like, are these concepts antithetical? Can you make an escape room that like really feels cozy? And so what they came up with, which I want to pass off to them, is this experience that like, in my opinion, felt incredibly cozy. It's untimed, or rather they're time tickets, but then once you're in the space, you can stay as long as you want. And there were multiple play styles that we designed for, one of which was just come into the room and chill out. There are all these, what we called cozy traps. There's a chessboard, there are 80s video games that you can play, there are comic books, there's a little painting station at one part of the game. You can really just like go and hang out in the space if that's the way you want to play. But if you want to look deeper, there were all of these other puzzles and like deep narrative lore, a ton of amazing ephemera created by Kat to like kind of let players really like sink into the narrative depths of the thing. So we wound up with these 5 different endings and this experience that players could play kind of however they wanted to.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to hear more from the students themselves as well. So, about inspirations, design philosophies, like what went into the first draft of the project?
So big question there is going to be, which first draft are you talking about? Were you talking about
It
the
sounds
fall?
like there's a story there.
I was trying to figure out which one room you were asking about.
Well, so Lauren, you said you experienced Home for the Holidays, but have you experienced Memoirscape?
That's a good question. I went to the January one.
Okay. So I think that maybe, Kathleen, if you want to take, like, we can all speak to what is the impetus or the draft of the first one, but I think that's a good starting point for you, Lauren, in particular, to kind of bring you to what Memoirscape became, which is when, Kathleen, then this becomes your pony show.
Sure. So for the first draft of the room, which is Home for the Holidays. We were really inspired by reading materials that Melissa exposed us to, plus a lot of avant-garde immersive experiences as well. In particular, I was really influenced by Bernadette Flynn's Digital Hearth. So this was very much an exploration of how video games in particular serve as a place for social connection and coziness, even if the game itself doesn't narratively or conceptually deal with coziness. So we were thinking about applying that idea and that experience and actually making it the central conceit for a physical space. I was also simultaneously working on a call for papers focused on consensual play, and scholar Maddie Bryce and game designer Maddie Bryce argues that the best way to promote consent in a game has nothing to do with like signing forms or agreeing to certain things, but rather contextualizing the player. So we were playing with literal context by including a space in which the students are familiar, but that was an idea that we really went off the rails wild with in Memoirscape. So yeah, those are my cited references for inspiration for the first draft. Kat, take it away.
Oh God, I was going to throw it to Hannah. Okay, Hannah, you're on notice. For me, so weirdly, I was really interested. I don't come from a gaming background. I don't do a lot of gaming. There's a very long-running joke that I don't like games, and I stick by that. But for me, I was really just interested in seeing what we could create. I was interested in creating a traditional escape room, but I also am very interested in what people like to, like, what is everybody's influence? From my perspective, it's always about what will get the audience an experience that they're pleased to have had. And that can be a negative experience, but if, people will buy a video game and spend 17 hours staring at a screen incredibly angry, and they're happy to have done so. So that's where kind of the sweet spot is. So how can we create that in an escape room? So for me, coming in, I kind of, for the first draft, hung around, tried to learn as much as I could. And then when we were coming down to crunch, I'm like, what would an audience like to be able to do at this point? They want to have thrills and chills and read weird notes, because I'm also an audience and I like to read weird notes on things. So for me, it was very much just what can we do that will help me learn what this entire genre is about. Hannah?
For the first draft, I found myself drawn towards learning how to manage a group, but also like finding that solution to connect the narrative with the puzzles and find ways to bring that into the actual visual elements of the room. You do it so much in video games. You see portals with the posters on the walls, the cake is a lie, whatnot. Oops, spoilers. But like that kind of element in a physical landscape, finding a way to draw your players in without letting them know that you're trying to draw them in.
Awesome. Yeah, I think finding that coherence between narrative and gameplay is definitely one of the most common struggles, I think, of game developers. How did you guys make that manifest?
It's funny you say that. So I feel like in Home for the Holidays, we did not accomplish this. But just being honest, it's sort of my ugly child now. So I'm going to just be frank about it. But we were really, I think I can speak for the team, where escape rooms definitely have their place, traditional escape rooms. However, for folks who are narrative oriented or folks who are very interested in environmental storytelling, they can be somewhat limited in terms of exploration, where oftentimes the narrative is usually just a premise or a pretense to justify the existence of the room, and the puzzles might have some connection in terms of theme, but it's not really expanded upon in the play style. So for the second draft of the room, the narrative came first, the themes came first, and the puzzle was built in service of communicating that narrative. So our way of doing it wasn't really novel, but we just flipped the script and made the narrative come first instead of the puzzles and trying to come up with something to connect the puzzles in a narrative way. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
I am going to pop in because, as everybody in the group knows, I went a little bit bananas over a book that I ended up reading in the spring, and half the IMGD faculty in the chat is going to know exactly which book I'm talking about now.
I was wondering when you were going to bring it up.
Predictable? Myself? No.
Go for it.
There's a book called Magic and Showmanship by Henning Nelms. It is it's from the 1960s. It's by a magician who found that a lot of his fellow magicians were building their routines around tricks. And so they would get momentary satisfaction from their audience, but they wouldn't get meaningful satisfaction. They wouldn't get a meaningful experience. And so he was advocating that magicians go forth and learn from theater, learn from writing, and start from a theme, start from a motivation, and build out from there, because there's a billion tricks. It's not hard. But if you have a story, you can make somebody care about something, even if you do the simplest possible, coin behind the ear. Well, when you convince somebody that that coin is the thing that, their grandfather left to them, that's the last thing that they ever got, suddenly there's an emotional connection from a very simple thing. And so he was really advocating for that. And it was an astonishing read for me. And it very much influenced my ability to then connect with what everyone else in the group was going for. So for me, it was, we can do puzzles, but what is the motivation? What is the narrative? And how do we do this in a really practical magic and showmanship kind of way?
Thanks so much. Did going with a narrative first approach create any unique challenges for you during the design process?
Yes, very much so. As director, it was really funny to, so we had a team with multiple different approaches and values when it comes to games. And the people here get it. Not everybody got it. Trying to pitch a narrative-driven escape room that's not an escape room, that, the puzzles themselves aren't really groundbreaking or super complex. And then this plot is happening in this nonlinear way. It's a hard thing to pitch to designers who might be more interested in designing just a really effective traditional escape room. I don't know if others could speak to that pressure to sort of explain this thing in very defined terms when it's very much an indefinite experience.
Yeah, there was a lot of back and forth with letting people come in at whatever time and stay for however long they want, or having puzzles have to be reset while the room was going on and people were still going through the experience. And then also having minimal puzzles in the experience caused a lot of people who weren't seeing the vision quite as far as others to get a little bit stressed out. Like they see it as incomplete. They don't see it as a full experience because it doesn't have all of the puzzle elements that they were expecting for the experience in their head.
I will say, one, this is not an original problem to us. We're seeing, in the news recently that there's quite large companies that maybe have the same problem with significantly larger budgets and larger, money, more people with much more experience. But more than that, well, not more than, in addition to that, I think that it's a little bit becoming upset about the thing that the genre you love, and it's not, you're not writing the genre you love. So a horror writer is not necessarily going to be really into romance conventions and vice versa. Not to say that they're not, but if you come into an experience expecting that you're going to write, the next Friday the 13th, and you're being asked to write the Philadelphia story, it's not going to be the same kind of experience, and that's okay. But explaining that that's what's happening, or even realizing that that's what's happening, was, I think, a major part of our spring. Or at least y'all's spring. I was off, doing spreadsheets.
So we've been talking a little bit about the first draft, how it started out and, what we learned from it. What turned into the second draft? What did you take away from that first draft, and how did it change between the two?
Oh my. They're hardly recognizable, honestly. If you played Home for the Holidays and you played Memoirscape, you would not think that they were the same, or even made by the same people, to be honest. So our takeaways from Home for the Holidays were folks really loved having actors in the room. That was really an interesting thing for people to be able to interact with people. So that theater element. So we really wanted to take that and really expand it, because our actors were designers who could memorize one line. So not exactly compelling, performance there. So what would happen if we actually juiced the theater elements of our room? In addition to that, we had these horrible walls, and thank you for not mentioning the walls. So we had this secret room in the room, and we thought, we want this to be a cozy experience where people get lost in this space. We need to make it a space where people actually feel like they want to spend time here, and like a guillotine door will not behead them. Though RIP guillotine door, we miss you and love you. Or maybe we don't. But from there, we put money towards building real walls out of actual lumber. In the room itself has a host of design problems that I'm sure Hannah could talk with more accuracy about. But we stole the ideas from our first draft: coziness, theater, and immersion. But we went about it in very different ways. Does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think something else that really changed between the first and the second draft is that the sort of sense of space exploded a little bit. Like the room for Home for the Holidays was this one room in the sub basement of our department building, and it's awesome, and it's an awesome room, and thank you, Jillian. But like for the next room, we were like, what if we just took over several other spaces in the building, which we did wind up doing to, in my opinion, great narrative effect, because it felt so it felt so engaging to like be in a space that you were told was an escape room, and then to like have that meta moment when you realize, oh wait, I'm not actually trapped in this room, like I can leave, and in fact the narrative is asking me to leave. And then you leave, and then you find a different room, and then there's more narrative material there, and then by the time you get to the third room, you're already like, oh my gosh, is this entire campus a game? Like it kind of changes your mindset around how you're engaging with space outside of this one game. I mean, it certainly did for me. That was in part because like my office got taken over for a month and like turned into like one of the rooms of the game. So I was just kind of like squatting in this like office of like my colleague that was just like a fictional colleague who like, was this professor who like I was playing. Anyway, yeah, I think one of the coolest things about physical interactive experiences is this overlap between fiction and reality, and how much it can feel like you blur the lines between where the fiction is and where the reality is. We all spend a lot of time on this campus and a lot of time like in these rooms outside of gameplay, and so kind of enchanting them with this game that had you like move between them, at least for me, it started to like make the whole campus feel like it was sort of this magical game element, and I think that's cool.
I can't really express how amazing it is to watch players realize they can open the door and that in fact they have to find out things. Watching the game world expand in their eyes is such a satisfying experience. And thank you to Melissa for letting us use your office and changing your name tag on your office and kind of making your life an ARG for the last 2 semesters. So thank you.
I think no regrets.
I think, Melissa, you started to realize that like the meta moment when you dropped into our chat, like the Discord, that students were approaching you because they were worried that something had happened to you because your nameplate was different. Like, had you been replaced? Like, what's happening? And
Yeah,
that's such an interesting moment.
I ran into some trouble in office hours, and like a student like DM'd me and was just like, "What happened to you? Like, are you in another building now? Like, I thought you were here," and I had to be like, "Oh no, it's a game. Don't worry about it." And but yeah, that's really fun. I like when that happens. I think like makes you like stop and reflect a little bit on like these parts of the world that you just take for granted.
Well, and I do also want to. Yeah, you go.
When the escape room becomes an arc.
Yeah. And related to that, there's within our story, people have to leave, but they also come back home. It's a very important part of it that they come back to the room. They make that choice to come back to that room. So we've created an escape room where people want to come back and they want to stay. And when they come back at the end and they realize the cumulative history of all the other players who made the exact same choice, because that's a mechanic that we included in the room, that you can see the process of time and the choices other players made, even if they are not present. And that moment was always, I thought it was really fun when they made the, oh geez, and they leave the room. That was a lot of fun to watch, but the coming back and the realization of the passage of time and effort of other people was the thing that, and Melissa saw it, and I'll swear it didn't happen, but I didn't almost start crying in front of other people because of it. So
They come back with something precious. They made something that they contribute to the room that's precious to them, and seeing their faces when they come back with that is just something beautiful.
That actually connects to so when we were first imagining this room as an experience with staggered play where players could essentially walk in on other people playing, that was difficult to convince people to do on a design side. But the value of that experience is that players actually model what it's like to play in this room. So when they see them leaving these painted rocks, they're like, what the hell are they doing? Where did they get those rocks? Like, what's going on? And watching them sort of find their way to the rocks and painting them and bringing them to the space was really cool. So I don't think it spoiled the experience for the players. It actually deepened it, and it created connections in the space with players from different groups.
I am going to pop it here. I'm realizing that we're saying a lot of things. Hey, Lauren, do you have any idea what we're talking about with regard to painted stones or rocks or any of that, dude?
I do not, actually.
Amazing! I'm definitely not making such wide noises that my camera's shaking a lot. Does anybody want to give... is the audience okay with hearing a meta-narrative of this plot? People in the room? I don't know.
Audience, speak now or forever hold your peace.
We actually have Shabam in the audience here. I see him. Hooray! Shabam, you should raise your hand and you can come into the thing, I think.
So we could... Oh, sorry, go for it.
We got thumbs up. Thank you. Appreciate you. Does Kathleen, you want to give the plot?
Sure.
Say?
Well, actually, just to also... While we are engaging the audience real quick, I just wanted to step in and say, audience, if you yourselves have any questions, feel free to drop them in the speaker questions channel, and we can take them as we go. But sorry, continue.
Sure. So the premise of the room is that Dr. Adler is this cognitive scientist who's interested in memory technology, and she's putting together this presentation of a memoirscape where she uses memory technology to essentially recreate the coziest memories of her life, which in her case would be the summer before she went away to college to Berkeley to study computer science in her grandmother's apartment in Queens, 1986. So in that room, when you walk in, you'll note that there are cassettes that are hidden throughout this larger meta puzzle that reveal information about her memories. And though they're cozy, there's moments of glitches and moments of unease that indicate that maybe this is a skewed perspective of the past. And you'll also note that there are all these rocks with different colors and different images on them. And essentially what happens is the player discovers a lab machine from using these cassettes, which connect to a meta puzzle. And the lab machine in this very strange room where presumably Dr. Adler's been doing the memory technology and trying to fix the memories, they find her actual office where Adler's stuck in sort of this strange loop, unable to process some of the things that occurred in the past, but also the present. And she's painting rocks, and essentially she insists that the player paint their coziest memories or leave some kind of memento to basically help her recovery journey by dropping them off in her Memoirscape. And that the player's choice around these actions determines what happens to Dr. Adler, specifically in relation to a queer love story that's the central driving force of our plot. Kat, do you want to add stuff? I feel like you should add stuff.
Actually, it's really, I love the way you ended that, because it speaks to, so cozy is cozy. It's supposed to feel good. It's supposed to have abundance. It's supposed to be nice. How do you have a cozy with a lose condition? And this is something that I actually had to deal with a project that I'm working on before I even started in IMGD. Let's not look at when I signed that contract. It's fine. But I was contracted to write a historical romance that's an interactive fiction game. And in the genre of, it's supposed to be the genre of romance. And romance has a requirement that you have a happily ever after. So how do you have a lose condition when you have to have a happily ever after? And the solution I came up with, which I'm certain is not original, but certainly wowed my editor, is that you will always end up with whoever you want to end up with. Relationship-wise, you will always have a happy ending. But maybe Britain falls to France and Napoleon takes over. That's the lose condition. So, how do you have a cozy interactive experience? In ours, there's dark parts, but your effort as a player has to have a impact. It has to have meaning. So our endings reflect the idea that no matter what, the fact that you participated at all helps Dr. Adler. She will get better. She will improve. She will have learned something, and it's because the player did it. Now, if the player does additional effort, if they go the full whole hog, which is a fairly, it provided you start puzzling and you have the time and you do the work, the perfect ending is not hard to get, I would say. Like, we don't make it difficult. It's not supposed to be. But if you make it all the way, you get our two plucky characters back together again. We get the true love ending. It's actually incredibly difficult to get the not true love ending to the point where that becomes a challenge. And we did have teams come back to play multiple times to try to get different endings, including worse ones. And no matter what, we have... One of the most interesting things for me that came out of this is the redefinition of common terms for escape rooms. What is a lose? What is escape? What is what does it mean to get trapped? What does it mean to all these things? And I think that really came up over and over again with what Memoirscape turned into.
Oh, so quickly jumping on, Shubham, who just joined us, hi Shubham, was our performance lead and played the TA, who is sort of the player's guide into the room and has his own kind of interesting, complex relationship to Dr. Adler and helps kind of characterize her before the player ever meets her, or if the player ever meets her.
Yeah. Hi guys. So in the case of our Memoirscape, what I could think of was like there was no win or lose condition. There was an acceptance and inacceptance condition. And the endings that we had were possible futures. So the more people get that ending, the more possible it is that that future is going to happen. So if more people get the ending number 4, so it's more possible, it's like the possibility of the future being the ending number 4 increases. The more people get the ending number 2, the more people get the ending number 3. Like it is multiple futures. It's like it's a multiversal theory actually in our Memoirscape. So the memories get collected, they may reach Professor Adler, they may not reach Professor Adler. Like it's like 87% of the memories have reached her. You don't know if it was your memory or it was someone else's memory, but it has reached her. There is a possibility that it has reached her, it has helped her, and it just feels nice. And coziness comes only after hardship. It doesn't come easy. It That's what we wanted to show. Like you can feel that coziness because Professor Adler, has experienced it. She knows what's cozy for her, what's good for her. She can distinguish between the good and the bad memories. That's why she actually separated those. But what she hasn't done is that she has accepted that good comes with bad. That's what we are trying to show her.
That's beautiful. I love that.
That's awesome.
Oh my God. And I wrote that down. So we're still discovering things about this. Like every day we are discovering more and more depth to it. The thing
awesome.
that made me not cry, because I definitely didn't do that, was when players would come back and they'd solve the puzzle. The puzzle was to paint a rock with Dr. Adler, and they come back and they realize all the rocks that they were like, what is this about in the room, suddenly have meaning. It recontextualizes the entire room, and we saw it over and over again across multiple demographics of this amazing moment of, oh, as they realize what their effort has gone to, and everybody else up to that point. And I love that idea of the acceptance. I'm gonna go over here.
Y'all have given me so much that I want to ask questions about. But I guess one thing that I'm picking up as a really common theme, player agency and how that ties into coziness. So I mean, we've been seeing definitely, I think, especially over the last few years, like a really big wave of like cozy experiences, cozy games, the cozy punk genre. What made y'all want to make a cozy game specifically? And actually, no, let's start with that.
I have very strong feelings about this. So in preparation for creating the first draft, we actually had to play escape rooms, and I was locked in a room with 5 wild IMGD students who were freaking out about the urgency. Somebody sat on the floor in defeat. Everybody here knows Toki, was freaking out to the last second. And I was like, this is on fire. This is not fun. Like I said, escape rooms have their place. But we really, and who we designed this room for, the puzzle enthusiasts and the escape room enthusiasts will have a good time with this room, but this is really a love letter and a nod to players who feel alienated by urgent gameplay, who feel somewhat intimidated by competitive gameplay, and who need some emotional safety and security to feel free to explore and not rush, and to still feel empowered and like they have some sort of say in their experience, who can leave their mark. So this was something we would kind of pitch to people to play our room who were like, oh, I'm not really into escape rooms. And just like, then you're the right person for this experience. That's my piece on that. So that was really who this room is meant for.
That being said, I did love seeing those who traditionally love like a real escape room getting frustrated with our room and then slowly enjoying it even though they didn't really want to, and then getting kind of pulled in by the story and are like, wait, I spent an hour and a half here. How did that happen?
That's what I call the lose condition, the real one, the one that we didn't tell people about. Like, oh yeah, we don't have a lose condition. Yeah, we absolutely do. And the lose condition is when you tried to have a game that's very traditional, it's very escape room, and instead you get trapped over and over again by our, oh no, you could sit for a minute. Oh, you read those books as a kid? Tell us more about it. Or, oh, you want some chocolate? You can absolutely have the chocolate. When we had our faculty playtesting, and we definitely weren't spying on them, they did such a good job. They tried so hard to not get trapped. And my favorite moment was when, not my advisor, definitely wouldn't be, I wouldn't tell stories about my advisor in a public way, but made it almost all the way to the end, definitely doing stuff, definitely making it through so they can provide good, solid feedback. And then right at the end, got trapped by painting rocks. And they're like, oh, this is so much fun. And in the chat, I definitely did not write, nor did I screen cap it and send it to them afterwards, "Get wrecked, Jillian." I didn't do that. Why would I do that? That would be mean. So I also appreciate about this project is even though Kathleen and Hannah in particular had really strong ideas about, cozy, nice, I still managed to find a great way to have my own kind of fun of like, no, we'll trap people. Oh, there's a lose. Oh, finding this ability was, I think, one of the multiple ways to play that existed not just for our players, but for the designers.
And I totally agree with all of that. I think on like a zooming out level, I have been thinking a lot this year about how to design like structured rest activities, like how to design like more or less for students. WPI is a very wonderful place, and it's also full of like very stressed out and like rush people. So I really liked the idea of like creating structured free play experiences where people would like walk into it expecting to like have this kind of like really structured play and then get like tempted into sort of having this unstructured play. Maybe like they would like come in thinking they were like gonna do one thing and then like find themselves like just like playing chess for 2 hours, which is like something that they would never do had they not like gone specifically to like have an experience. So I was thinking of it as this sort of like a picture frame around the sky, where like you put a picture frame around the sky and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, the sky is beautiful. Like, how did I not notice that until I like put this frame around it? I felt like the room was like that, but like for play. Sure, you could sit down and just play chess anytime, but like you wouldn't until like you get this sort of picture frame put around it, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I actually like really like painting rocks. Like this felt really like pleasant and peaceful, and like I enjoyed myself, and like you kind of saw people coming out the room the other side like with this sense of peace. And we actually have data to back that up, because in their player lab experience forms, we had them mark how they felt at the beginning of the experience and then how they felt at the end. And so we kind of have some data that we like have to go through for like what kind of a machine this room was. And like part of it was absolutely a calming machine. Like people came in like anticipatory and excited, and they came out like contemplative and joyful and sad, or like, but they had this arc, and like you can see it in the way that they filled out their experience surveys.
That survey is bananas, and we all talked ahead of time about like what we wanted to make sure we pointed out, and I've completely gone off script. But mine was going to be, we had a mechanic, again, Lauren, because you didn't play it, that's okay. We can drop a link to what it looked like in real life in this very chat as soon as I get off the mic, unless somebody else wants to.
Please do.
Yeah, no, because, we make these things available. This is immersive. So essentially, we had a bunch of mechanical reasons for needing something. We needed players to have something to write something down. And we wanted, again, it to be have a narrative reason. So we had ephemera already within the lab that was, the lab notes that talked about so that there was a narrative reason you could see the downfall of Professor Adler through the course of experiments. And I'm like, it's only one spot. We should really have it in more than one spot because, in real life, people have, paperwork and multiple things, blah, blah, blah. So it's a happy combination of theming and necessity and embedding some more clues to stuff, like whatever. But by accident, I had, just so I could show time, I had, in the lab notes, taken what turned out to be, it's called a Panelists scale. It's an emotional self-assessment. What's your emotional state before and after something? And I'd accidentally put one into the lab notes. And then I accidentally put it back into the survey that all participants get at the top of the experience from the TA. Because the narrative is that this is an experiment. This is a demo. You are helping Dr. Adler in many ways, but specifically for this. And so to get everybody into that mindset, you fill out ahead of time, what is your emotional state before you go in? And because this whole thing is about emotion, according to the meta-narrative of Dr. Adler's work. And what happened is that people were filling it out honestly, which I did not anticipate. They didn't have to. We told them to, and apparently they'll just do anything that, somebody in a white lab coat tells them to do. Different experiment. But they write that down. They took the notes inside. They did write notes. They wrote a ton of notes about like what their gameplay was. And then afterwards, because this is science, we asked them to fill out how they feel afterwards and then return it to us. And that's supposed to be the mechanic for getting their ending. We weren't sure we would have somebody who would be able to follow them through the whole experiment because, of course, this is staggered endings, staggered play. And what ended up happening is they ended up giving us real answers at the end, too. And we collected all their paperwork. So they gave us, we have like hundreds of responses now that are honest, that they did organically, that we didn't have to force them to do. They chose every time. It is insanely good information. And it's why we're able to say things like, yeah, no, they came in. We had people coming in who were, they were uncertain. They had anticipation, but maybe they also had, they were frightened because this is an unusual experience. And then they came out the other side and we saw things like love. We saw calm, serenity. We did see, sometimes we saw remorse, pensiveness. That was a big one that we got on the other side. And again, it's another one of those things that we are still taking apart and also being so privileged to get the opportunity to see that, I think, from players.
So I think so the players, most of the experience that we created was mostly, I think so, because we had the carpet in the room so that people can just feel cozy. And second thing was because we were in a basement, like a college basement, we couldn't trap people inside. So it couldn't actually be an escape room. So as we thought we couldn't trap people inside, we could let them explore more of the WPI. So that's why we had 2 more rooms added to the Memoirscape. So the memory actually takes you to one of the TA's lab and professor's own office, just because we couldn't trap the people inside. That just expanded the narrative because of constraints that we had.
We were also inspired.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it, please.
Well, just another challenge that it sounds like came up here, and that you guys have touched on a little bit, is, and this is, I think, the bane of a lot of open world game designers, right? Is crafting a narrative that stays coherent no matter which direction your players go in. And I'm kind of curious how that went. How did you design around that, especially for the second draft where you opened things up dramatically?
Yeah, so just the same thing, it comes in as acceptance. We had to accept that it's going to change drastically, and it's not going to be the same that we had, the same thing that we had before, because the narrative we have right now doesn't match the first draft at all. It's completely different. You couldn't even recognize that we were doing these things before. And I think so, we had a time travel element, the first one, and we don't have anything. Because of that, we got the memory machine. It was supposed to be a time machine, and now it's just a memory machine. And we have, because of that, I think so, we have segmented endings right now, multiple realities we have, but we don't actually have any time travel in our escape room right now.
Yeah, so, go for it.
Well, there is no time travel in the escape room. I think we started thinking about it like completeness, basically. Players would come in and the endings are then based on how much of the game they wind up completing. So we have no control once they're in the room of how much depth they find inside. players who read every single piece of ephemera and, hell, read through this like young adult novel that's like really important to the main narrative that's like stashed under the pillow in the bedroom. If a player just like sat there and read that for a couple hours, like they would get a lot more out of the room. But like that level of like deep comprehension was certainly not something we were expecting from like all of the players, or even like any of the players. But we wanted to seed the room with those kinds of depth opportunities. Like if the player wanted to like really take in every detail, the hope was that the player would then be rewarded, and that as they spent more time in it, taking in more of the details, listening to each one of the cassette tapes, playing each one of the games, like there's ephemera in a lot of the different board games. So like if you open a board game, then you see a scorecard from Julia and her high school friend, Sean, that like they're keeping score. Like there's all these pieces of ephemera around the room that like help deepen the experience. So like the more time you spend, the more depth you get to. And so you're rewarded for your exploration, but you also can experience the room and have a good time, even if you have this like more superficial experience of it. Yeah, so that was one of the ways that we dealt with this question of like, once people go in, like, how do we possibly control and like keep them on track? And it's like, we're not going to keep them on track. We're just going to like deposit them in this space, and then we're going to trust them to get to the level of depth that's going to make this a good experience for them.
It was kind of like a battle between creator and the creation too. Like we had to just let go. Like what we have created has different meaning for everyone else. That's it.
That weird person who talks about practicality junk. We also noticed that we had an instruction like try to make the room, keep it like Dr. Adler would like to remember it, because we do have tapes that people pull out. We talked earlier about the concept of resetting, and how do we do that? That was a big concern early. What we found, and I don't think any of us predicted necessarily, is that not only would players, yes, they would listen to the person in the white lab coat who said, "Yeah, please put the stuff back." We started observing that there was an almost accomplice level of play happening, where because other teams were at different levels and people wanted to help each other maintain a flow of story so that they could discover the way they had discovered, we started seeing a lot of people resetting for us, but in a really sneaky way to try to maintain the illusion for others. So I observed as admin, I was sitting on the couch, and I was like, "Oh, don't forget to put things away." But I wasn't doing anything, and I watched one group was working at the computer. There's a computer game puzzle, and underneath it tells you to look underneath the desk for a tape. I was watching. I happened to know the tape had already been found, and it was being listened to in a different room, and they were on the cusp of solving and finding nothing. The other group finished, corrected, saw what was about to happen, and somebody came up palming, getting back to magic and palming the cassette, sneaked up and hit it. Nobody noticed. And then that player looked right at me as a person who worked within the room for acknowledgement and approval. Because they'd done it. They'd been part of it. They'd helped. And of course, as the admin, I'm like, and they felt really good, which gets back to the cozy idea. And so we saw that over and over again, this weird levels of participatory action and a collaborative play that we did not anticipate and we didn't write in. So, and now we have a motorcycle. But, point. There it is.
Yeah, so when I was first kind of imagining the second draft, I really wanted to do something with collaborative play, because there is collaborative play in escape rooms, but it's normally frantic, like, I can't figure out this puzzle. Can you figure out this puzzle? Oh my god, what's happening? Instead, we wanted something more collaborative in the sense that we're in a shared community together, and the ways that players look out and protect each other's playthroughs and experiences was something we hoped, but it's really cool that we actually did it. So...
by the way,
That's
in
incredible.
the chat, I dropped the link to if you guys want to see what the participant survey looked like for our remote players, it's basically the same, it just says remote. But if you want to see kind of what we were handing everybody who came in.
Yeah, absolutely. Go check that out. I'm also curious. So, a really central part to a lot of escape rooms or escape room adjacent experiences is, of course, the puzzles. And that's something we've touched on in passing here, but I'm kind of curious to know a little more about the puzzles. So, what was some of the most challenging puzzles to translate from the page to reality? And also, maybe what were some of the most fun ones to implement?
I could speak a little bit to this because I sort of came up with the meta puzzle of having the cassettes reveal a code, and having the television that's constantly looping reveal the location of the lab. And there's a black light that sort of shows these footprints leading from the room to the lab. From the lab, they discover the professor's office number, and then they go up to the office. It's not the most intuitive puzzle ever, and in fact, one of the previous designers was like, this is a bad puzzle. There's not really anything to this other than noting the hints and listening to the tapes. But in creating that puzzle, it was really not meant to reward players who were very interested in competence, having puzzles sort of confirm their competence in terms of logic. It's really meant to reward players for listening, being mindful, and exploring appropriately. So can they take in the information around them and find what they need to find?
Yeah, a lot of the room reinforced that experience goal. Like one of the puzzles that was in Home for the Holidays that was then again in Memoirscape, the video games that you're playing on this home computer, there are 5 or 6 different 80s games. There's Snake. People were really into Snake. There's Breakout. There's Frogger. There were like, these games that Toki programmed and that are just like fantastic. Totally this amazing element of the room. Only one of them, like if you play Breakout, you wind up with a clue that tells you where one of the cassettes is. But you would not know on going over and looking at the computer, like which of these 6 games, like you have to play to completion to like get that clue. So it encourages you to mess around. Like every element of the room, you're basically like, well, I guess I'll mess around with this thing because nothing like looks like a puzzle. And it's only after you play around with a whole bunch of stuff that you start to feel like this is leading somewhere. So at some point, I think Kathleen was saying that like it wasn't difficult to get to the ending. That's true, but it also took a long time. Like whenever I was up playing the professor, solidly the first hour, like no one would find me. Like it was, people really like took their time exploring things, and we wanted them to. Like we wanted it to feel like this experience that you could go in and spend a while getting comfortable and, playing around with things, and maybe like playing 10 rounds of Frogger before you like got bored and switched to Breakout, and then you were like, oh my gosh, there was a clue here all along. So that was kind of more the motivation when it came to the puzzles. Like there weren't padlocks on everything. Like usually you walk into an escape room, at least for me, the first thing I do in an escape room is I look around and I'm like, all right, how many padlocks are there? What, this one needs 4 letters, this one needs 3 numbers, this one, okay, so it's 4 colors, and they have to be, like, you're going through, like, what sort of information you are going to need to input in order to, like, solve those locks. We didn't want that to happen with people in this room. We didn't want people to be able to walk in and be like, oh, I know what I'm looking for. I don't know what the answer is yet, but, like, I do know I'm going to be looking for these like 4 numbers. I do think that's a fun way to play. And like, I've had a lot of fun in escape rooms doing that. But this time we were trying for more like, you just walk in and you're like going to play around and you're going to see what happens. And then like, oh, hey, that's so cool. We played around and we realized that there was a cassette tape that was under the desk. That's neat.
I do want to quickly add, just very quickly, we had a narrative constraint with the puzzles in the sense that the professor does not want you to necessarily discover her, and the TA isn't necessarily wanting you to find his lab. So the meta puzzle had to be congruent with the narrative goals, which meant that we couldn't have this super complex and discernible puzzle that goes against the narrative. We wanted it to fit with the character motivations. That's all.
Yeah, kind of playing into what Kathleen and Melissa said, all of the puzzles ended up being traps in their own right. So the video games invited you to come and play around for a little bit, get lost in what you love. The TV had a documentary going, but everybody was more focused on the commercials between them because they're silly, they're goofy, they're 80s commercials. There's books everywhere. There's chess and Scrabble, and there's comic books. There's just things that draw you in. So you may be looking for those clues through those puzzles, but every single one's trying to pull you away from the clue.
Yeah. So we designed the room because it was essentially designed by Professor Adler, and she didn't want people to actually know her backstory because that's what she was trying to hide. That's what she extracted from her memory, and that's what she tried to hide. So essentially, we also hid those things. But as things do, bad things do, they always resurface. And that's what was happening in the room too. Like the bad cassette tapes, the bad memories that she had were resurfacing, and people were trying to find out, and people then they found out that there was a memory machine that actually extracted her memories to make this room. Then they found out where Professor Adler is gonna be. Then they tried to go there, help her, console her, let her like accept the feelings that she was going through. And right now she's going through a hard time. Like her tenure is gonna get over. She's gonna like retire. Like Step is also away from her, and like it's a really hard time. And right now she's making a memory machine, and her memories are getting faded because she actually extracted her memories, and she just extracted the good parts because she wanted to make a cozy experiment. And like all the stuff just boils down to like acceptance for Professor Adler, and in the meta narrative also acceptance for the players that this is not a traditional escape room. This is a cozy room. Yeah.
You go.
And with that in mind, it was really important for us to make sure, like I said, the puzzles didn't disrupt immersion by being hyper complex and spoiling the story. One of the pillars of our room was glitch, and it's through the glitches in the tapes that you accidentally discover Professor Adler. And we also wanted to make sure that even though this was a cozy experience, that we weren't playing into some heroic complexes by curing Adler of all of her problems and fixing everything. This is a recovery story, but it's not one that leaves the character where you save the day, basically. You can just help in these marginal but profound and important ways.
And you help in a collaborative sense. It's collaborating with, it's community-based. It's a community that you may never know, except it's self-selecting is other people who decided to help too. And the concept of that, the idea of what people, for the sake of art, for the sake of story, but for the sake of one another, will do, sight unseen, is intensely powerful, and is ultimately that which is what helps Dr. Adler. And a lot of, for me, in terms of like narrative, you know, how do we create a story that, you know, where, oh, sure, the puzzles are super easy. Sure. You do X, Y, Z. Well, then why would you want to? Well, the answer is because there's somebody who needs you. There's somebody that you can help. And it turns out a lot of people will just help. Even if it's for somebody who does not exist. We have that urge. And it's a nice way for people who don't know that this is the kind of thing that you can do in an interactive media experience. It turns out you can feel things, you can do things for something that's fake. You know it's fake. You know that it's been made up by a bunch of students. And yet you feel accomplishment. You feel like you've actually done something. And on top of that, when you come back to the room with the rock, you literally have done something. You get to see that as well. just the levels of what we can do in terms of lowering the threshold for other people, which was such a mind-blowing thing. You talk about pillars, Kathleen. For me, that was one of my pillars, was helping you reach that goal of introducing the fact that this is an incredibly powerful genre. It's an incredibly powerful form of art, and it's being, gatekept is the wrong idea, but it's an incredibly high threshold in a lot of ways for a lot of people, and it shouldn't be. And this was a way that we could, from multiple angles, demonstrate the importance of what we do, and let that be something that other people can experience as well.
I love that. I think at various sort of game dev gatherings recently, fostering pro-social gameplay has been a consistent theme, and that's something I always love to see more of. Now, I will say we have about 20 minutes left, and I have plenty more questions that I could ask, but I do think that it sounds like a good time, perhaps, to open the floor to the audience in case you guys have any questions that you would like to ask our speakers. Feel free to drop them either in the event stage chat or the speaker questions chat. We can give folks a little bit of time.
I know I typed it, but Kat, that was so touching. Thank you.
So we have a question from Ben. Ben would love to hear more about, Shubham, what you were saying about there being no cozy without hardship. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the coziness, there's, as we know, there's no good without evil. There's no comfort without hard work, and so there's no coziness without hardship. You can't find your comfort zone if you don't know what comfort is and what hardship is. If you don't go out, if you don't how do you get a good night's sleep if you work whole day and just crash at your bed, right? That's the best sleep you can get. Right now, I woke up at 4 today, so I was just sleeping, and I just slept for half an hour, and that was it just rejuvenated me because I was working from 4 to 2 continuously. I had to go out, I had to work out, I had to do everything, and my body was satisfied with my work, so it just crashed. Yeah, you deserve your rest right now. That's what my body was telling me. Yeah, so that's what coziness is like. You deserve your own cozy place because you have discovered it through hardships. You know what makes you happy, you know what makes you uncomfortable, but you got to know that to make that cozy room more meaningful, you got to acknowledge the hardships too, and you got to go out of your comfort zone to actually expand it too.
That was great. I just want to add one theoretical point that so in the Cozy Games article that from 2018 from Tanya Short et al. That everyone cites now as the definition of cozy games. Cozy games have safety, abundance, and softness, and the authors talk a lot about how cozy games are about getting to the higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So whereas in a lot of games you're looking for food and shelter and a place not to be eaten by a bear, some real basic stuff. Cozy games are interested in kind of self-awareness and creativity and reflection and social needs and all those sorts of higher order needs. So I also like the idea of building off of what Shubham is saying, that coziness is what comes when you've like dealt with the hardship part and you like no bear is eating you, and instead you're like able to like process and focus on things that are on a different level.
Any questions?
Thank you both. Let's see. So if folks do have more questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I suppose in the meantime, I've got a few more that I can ask, but don't be shy. We can take an aside to answer any of those. So I'm kind of curious. You guys have touched on this a little bit. You've talked about a remote experience for the escape room. That sounded very interesting to me, and I'd love to know a little bit more about it.
Can I? Yeah, I apologize because you guys y'all have to stop me. Hold up a sign and just be like, no. We were very, very fortunate, I feel, between the run of our public room and FDG, which we were also like, I can't believe we got to show this here. We were fortunate to be approached by a podcast out in New Zealand called The Cryptid Factor. And they have a Patreon. They have about 1,000 people internationally. And they're like, and I'm part of it. I had been working on various ephemera during like chats and things like that. And it turned out they were very into the idea of immersive experiences. But, you know, they're in New Zealand. There are people in multiple different countries. And we're in a tiny town in Massachusetts. So, and they're like, is there any chance that we could get like a video walkthrough? And I'm like, oh, Ghostbusters, when someone asks if you're a god, you say yes. So I'm like, yes. Quickly emailing, Melissa and Kathleen and, messaging Jillian, just be like, hey, y'all, is this something we're cool with? Through many trials and tribulations, it turns out, yes, we are. We ended up doing, through their Patreon, a Zoom walkthrough where essentially it was myself with a phone and a cell phone cage as a not first-person shooter. Shooters are not cozy. First-person point of view, with their host controlling about 30 people, offering suggestions, and directing me like a robot, basically, through the room. And they live played, and what was really they ended up posting the recording on their Patreon, but it provided for us a really fascinating set of data for whether or not this was something that was viable. Because when we think about immersive experiences, or escape rooms, we think about the physicality. And this very much did not have a physicality aspect by its nature. What I found, and what we have found subsequently, because they did give us the video, is that we were seeing the same kind of emotional beats in terms of there was at least one player who had grown up with their grandparents, had lost them recently. We had, I've been calling, I don't know if there's an official term for this, but sort of the Wizard of Oz opening the door from black and white to color, or the Willy Wonka from the big factory into the beautiful landscape. We have the opening the door into 1986, and she felt the same visceral reaction to, oh God, this is my grandparents. And that was through a camera. That was at a remove. That was in a group environment. We have chat records of the same, hitting the same moments of like, oh my God, we get to leave the room. The discovery of what goes on. The, oh no, we have to help her. The realization of what all the rocks mean at the end. We had all of that. And it was interesting that it also took about the same amount of time. It was about maybe an hour, 45 minutes in total. So it took the same amount of time. We were getting the same emotional beats. We were getting the same investment, which I'm not sure we would have gotten from, we have to figure out how to do the puzzle lock, because it was narrative. It's very conceptual. There's a lot of aspects that we have some sort of ambient puzzle play. We have coasters that spell out words that are relevant to the, sort of the theme of what's going on. So while they were discussing what to do next and what it all meant, or providing context for one another, which was fascinating, because there's these big age ranges. And it was international. So people were like, you have to understand what it was like to be queer in the 80s. here's what this was. We developed sort of screensaver positions, so like interesting locations that we could just have the camera focusing. And the person over to the side who was being the hands, because I had a cell phone cage, would start idly doing coasters. And so what ended up happening is that people who were happy to talk were all chatting about something, and people who were watching started seeing things happening. So we also had multiple levels of play happening in what should be a single stream environment. It was insane. And also there's like strange little bits of FOMO of like, I wish I could, they were asking like, what does that smell like about the cologne that we have? And I'm sitting there being like, it smells like my nose is burning off, but sure, it smells like middle school in 1986. You remember potpourri? Now imagine it up your nose. Things like that. But those opportunities, they were asking for this kind of interaction. And we had players from, that I knew of. We had our New Zealand host, we had Canada, we had England, we had Scotland, we had Portugal, we had multiple people from across the US. And that's not even counting the long tail of who watches the video afterwards. There are people who couldn't make it. This was a brand new thing. They didn't know how to describe it, but they just went in because they had trust in the host audience. And yeah, they were all in, and they still felt really proud and happy, and they keep wanting to know what's happening with the room, and how many more rocks have appeared, how is Dr. Adler doing? And so I think that this kind of experience, that what we've developed here, is a model for how you can create experiences that are accessible, not just across space and time, but also if you think about what are colloquially called like mommy and me movie theater appearances, or one of those accessible movie theaters where they keep the lights up and the sound down. It's so that people can approach things. Let's say you have, we do have some level of movement, or you have to bend over, or things like that. This is another way to experience that without feeling like there's this beautiful art form that you are excluded from. And to speak to Kathleen's point again, there are people who had never done an escape room, that had never done an immersive experience, because there's that level of stress and concern. But this was an opportunity to go with a group that they trusted, and they were able to do it within their own homes and experience it within time that they got to control. And so I think that this is very much a model that we can expand on, and I hope that we get the opportunity to do so. Jillian.
Yeah. And I think so. This is the best example of collaborative play instead of competitive play, because like I don't think so there was any competition between any of the players, like never. And the most like ephemeral way they got like joy out of it was like there were so many people here because there are so many rocks there, and they want to know like how long this experience has gone, like has been there for, how long it's gonna be. Is that 87% gonna be 100% someday or not? Like that's what like it's and they are even trusting that Professor Adler's recovery is gonna be in people's hands, the people of the future. Like they will keep coming back. They will keep putting the stones in. It's gonna reach 100%, the memory extraction.
That's awesome. I love also that in your quest to create immersive and unique experiences, you really played on the, I guess, the idea of a first-person game in which you were controlling a literal human character. Or controlling, I guess, in a way, guiding maybe. So there's so many more questions I want to ask, but we've got about 5 minutes left, and just as we sort of wind down, I would love to know a little bit more about what's next for each of you. What projects are you excited about? What plugs do you have? What's coming down the pipes?
I guess
Melissa.
I'll kick it off.
Sorry.
I'm working on my capstone, which is another cozy experience. Very different from this one, but it's finally getting to the point where I'm going to have to start building it soon, which is the fun part.
And for me, I'm building a personal project known as VR Museum, and it's completely in the opposite direction of this. You destroy everything you see inside. That's what it is. That's it.
It's a
And
VR
it's
rage room.
awesome.
I've got a lot of too many things, but I think the thing I really want to try to finish up is again that interactive romance novel. It's what would the contract and all, because they maybe require that then. But it is it's coming out through Heart's Choice, which is an imprint of Choice of Games, and Regency romance with definitely has a loose condition. So don't let down Britain.
And I creatively, I'm not quite sure. I am real excited about where this room might go in future incarnations. Stay tuned next semester. There is the rumor of musical robots, so we'll see. But for me personally, I've got a paper coming out soon called A Happier, Healthier You, Fair Play and the Promise of a Future Self. It's about self-help games and bad tabletop game design and some of the ways that middle-aged women are encouraged to play in America, which is, spoiler, extremely disturbing. Anyway, I'm getting really interested in this overlap between the self-help and wellness industrial complex and cozy games. Because there is this intersection, and I don't think it's being handled super responsibly, but it's fascinating the way that this overlap is happening, and between audiences that are gamers and consumers of self-help are not usually the same population, but they're becoming the same population in this really interesting way.
For me, so I'm just wrapping up my first year of my PhD, which is crazy to think about. So as I start my second year, I'm working on an artist criticism project where I'm trying to introduce concept of solarpunk philosophy through interactive galleries. I'm interested in creating a cozy labor practice around game development, so that's going to be something I focus on. And lastly, I'm guest editing a journal for the Journal of Gaming and Virtual Worlds called Consensual Play, where I'm trying to solicit papers that relate to consent, whether or not a game invites or rejects or complicates player consent in gameplay. So that's my main thing for now. Yes, it does need more solarpunk content. Thank you, Spider-Man.
That was me. That is fantastic. Honestly, all of those sound super exciting, and if there was a disparate panel of all of the other things that you guys are working on coming up, I would do that too. I think we are basically at close. If folks still have any questions they want to ask the speakers, the chat is still open, and folks feel free to answer asynchronously, I suppose. But in the absence of that, I really, really want to thank you all for coming, both the audience for being an awesome audience and the speakers. This was fascinating. I cannot put into words how awesome that was. So I wish you all the very best in your future ventures, and hope that you stay tapped into the Boston game dev scene.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Before we drop off, people who want to find out more about Memoirscape and what we do, send an email to imgd@wpi.edu. We have mailing lists, we have information we can send you. So keep an eye out for that. Contact us. We want you to be part of us.
Actually, on that note, we actually have in our text channels a presenter info channel. Feel free to put all of your plugs, social media, anything about this. I'm getting some echoes. Anything about the escape room that you want to share with folks, put it all in there.
we might be running it through the summer if you guys want to.
We'll see. It'll be in the channel. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
I'll
so
do that.
much.
Thank you.
This was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.